Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Scene Event. Our current strand of Scene Events is all about films that go beyond the human, exploring unusual environments to help us better understand our own. So all the films in this series consider non-human worlds, perspectives, and characters, and in the process they highlight all of the different places that film can take us to. I'm Jack Synnott, and I'm a BFI Film Academy Young Programmer. This week I'll be talking to Joshua M.G. Thomas about his film Heaven is Overrated. Joshua is a director and writer based in South Wales, and his shorts have screened at prestigious International Film Festival, New York Film Festival, Celtic Media Festival, and Indie Fest, among many others. He previously ran the creative department of Go Amplify, a production company in Bahrain, and more recently, he's worked on a number of productions for Bad Wolf, serving as the series producer and director's assistant on the final season of his Dark Materials, the executive assistant to showrunner Russell T Davies on the Doctor Who 60th anniversary and the seasons beyond, and the director of Tales of the Tardis for BBC iPlayer. Heaven is Overrated is a comedy drama about a straight-laced, aspiring angel whose entire worldview is shifted by a deceased social media influencer who wants to return to Earth to continue living. It uses a sharp sense of humor and an impressive sense of visual scale to paint a portrait of heaven as an unappealing, stuffy place and to champion the value of even the most mundane moments of ordinary life. I'm incredibly excited to welcome Joshua here to tell us more about his film and his filmmaking journey. So Joshua, to kick things off, do you want to introduce yourself and your film, Heaven is Overrated?
Hi, yeah, I'm Josh. I'm a writer, director, producer, and yeah, Heaven's Overrated is just the story of Bartholomew, an insecure by the book perfectionist angel, and he's tasked with welcoming the recently deceased into Heaven's waiting room. And his first death, Peter, challenges him to face his fears, doubts, insecurities, ideologies, and basically his entire life up until this point, working as an angel in heaven. And it was a really fun project to be a part of for the BBC Wales It's My Shout short film scheme. And it was just a hell of an experience, really. And it was really fun to work with the new writer, Matthew Ford. It was great to work with a lot of up and coming kind of talent in South Wales, which is always great. And yeah.
Great. And I think what's really interesting for the scene strand that we're on at the minute is how the film presents heaven, which is this kind of very different world to our own. And I just love how it's presented in the film as this kind of vast library with all this kind of weird architecture. So maybe could you tell us a bit about where the inspiration for that came? Were there any particular visual touchstones, like other films that you drew on, or was that just completely out of your own brain?
Oh, I mean, totally not my idea. First and foremost, props to Matthew, the writer, who I mean, the line in the script is interior Heaven's waiting room day, a grand library. It's quiet. That is the opening, and the first time I read it, I went, great, I'm in. I just thought it was such a clever way to portray heaven. I think it's stacked with symbolism and ideology, and I just thought it was a very, very intelligent yet practically achievable way to show heaven without doing what we always do in film and telly, which is a white void, and there is a man or woman stood there saying, I am God, welcome, or I am an angel, I have wings. And it was just really, really interesting that he decided to place Heaven's waiting room in a library. And we kind of just riffed and developed on that. So, for example, in the first kind of draft of the script, there were no angels wandering around. It was just Bartholomew just doing his job. And we kind of decided to add more to the scene to make it feel like a functioning section of heaven. Almost like customs. That's kind of how we went. That's how we developed that. We kind of saw it as, if Peter is going to land here and he is being processed into heaven, what is that process and what does that look like? Do we have more people, less people? What are those people doing? And we just kind of built on that. So totally Matthew's idea. So I will take no credit for that.
So it's great that you talk about the practicality there, because the film features a number of fantastical sequences, in particular, the point where Bartholomew carries out the miracle. Would you have any advice for young filmmakers who are trying to achieve those types of effects, often on a particularly tight budget?
So what I would say is that your guiding light throughout anything is always going to be, what is the story beat I'm trying to achieve? That is the only thing that matters. If you want to do an explosion, you want to do a VFX shot, that's all well and good. And if you've got the budget to do it, that's awesome. But if you're not telling the story beats that are in the script, the audience are not going to A, know what's going on, B, it's not necessarily what they came to watch, and C, it's your job as a director to make sure that everybody understands what's going on in this story. So always make sure that you are achieving your story beats before anything else. Adding value on top of that is always great, and it shows that you know that it shows that you have a wider creative understanding on how to make something visually interesting. But story beat first and foremost, always. Um, if I was to give you any examples of, say VFX shots, we had no budget for VFX. I had to beg and plead the broadcasters and the production team to be like, do we have any space whatsoever to achieve just the smallest of VFX shots when Peter first lands in the chair? How do we do that? And we managed to achieve it by having someone underneath a wheelie chair spinning the chair. We did a shot where the chair is just spinning, and then we matched the same shot where we had Peter in the chair spinning at the same speed. And I sent it to the editor and I said, please help. Can we just make it look like he's appearing as if from nowhere? And then we figured it out. And so we had a plan, and we kind of had to, I hate saying it, but we did have to just figure it out in post because we had multiple issues on the day trying to achieve our VFX shot. And that was kind of the process that we had for that. And then when it comes to Bartholomew, conjuring things out of nowhere, we did that in the cut. We did it in the cut. There's no real VFX to it at all. There is no VFX to that. It's all in the cut. And we said to ourselves, how do we achieve that without using a VFX budget? And we just said, well, there's so many other elements to filmmaking that we can use instead. Like, we use sound effects, we use music, we use the framing, we use the pacing, we used all of these different things to make you believe that something is about to happen, but we don't know what. And then it just appears because, like a lot of magic, it just happens. So that's kind of what we did with that. And I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's great to hear how you can do so much really with so little. And what you're saying as well about the story really carrying it. I think most people who've seen the film will agree that the relationship between Bartholomew and Peter is really the heart of the film and what carries you through it. So do you have any advice on how you worked with the actors to achieve that? Anything that you took away from working on something so character focused?
I think it's vital that you let actors experiment and play with the characters first. Remember, you saw something in these actors when you auditioned them. You saw something, maybe they brought something new to the script, or they brought a nuance you didn't think of. And you have to trust that instinct. So whenever I'm doing rehearsals, I just go, I'm giving you absolutely no direction. Let's just go through the scenes, do what you think is right for the character based on what you have at this point, and what you've based on the image you have of this character in your head right now. Let's just run with it. And I'll make notes based on what I like, what I think works with the character, what I don't think works with the character. Does this moment pay off later on in their relationship? Does it not? Does it add to the arc? Does it detract? Does it add more conflict? There's so many different things that an actor will bring to that an actor will bring to the script that you potentially won't think of. So my go-to is always, let's just play with it. Let's see where it goes. And then I'll give them some direction to make sure, again, that we're hitting the story beats that we need. Does it hit their character story beats as well? And watch their gestures. What are their instincts? What do they lean into? And the more you can lean into an actor being comfortable with their initial instincts, I always find the better the performance is going to be later because it's more natural for them. So building that rapport and that relationship and that trust with actors is essential for a director, period. Your relationship with the cast should carry through, and you should want to have that relationship with the cast because they'll inevitably push you to be better as well. And if you can push them to be better, then you couldn't ask for anything more. So I think that's essential to making a relationship believable and engaging, is authenticity. And you do that by letting them be authentic in the way that they want to deliver their work.
Right. And I think what really comes across there is this kind of emphasis on collaboration. And obviously, you've kind of mentioned it already that another person you collaborated with was the writer, Matthew Ford. Could you talk a little bit about what that relationship was like and just what it's like kind of working with writers in general as a director?
Matthew was a dream to work with because he was just so open to changes and ideas and letting me go off on tangents. But then he was also really good, which is essential for a writer to say, actually, no, that's not the story I'm telling, or that's not something that I think fits in this world. And we'd have really collaborative and constructive conversations on what we think is right for this film. Based on my experience versus his experience, we went back and forth about what we thought A is achievable in the story, in the page count, with the infrastructure that we have from the scheme, what is achievable and what are we not going to sacrifice? What are we okay with sacrificing? And what's kind of our middle ground and compromise? Because you never know what'll happen going into production with a scheme or with a short film or anything like that. So you always have to have a little bit of leniency if you need to make a cut somewhere, or if you need to add something because something's changed. You've got to be quite nimble with that. And I think that Matthew and I built a relationship to the point where we were able to do that. Like, for example, the night before we were supposed to shoot a scene on a location, the location was no longer safe for us to use. So Matthew and I had to rewrite the ending. The ending, as you see now, was not the ending that we had after the first day of filming. We had to completely rewrite it. And if anything, it pays off and it worked even better. So it's quite funny how the living organism and life cycle of making a short is probably the most exciting part of it, because it's constantly changing. And if you have a good relationship with the writer, you both are going to be able to edit and add value to the script at probably any given moment, as long as you have that relationship. And the best way to do that is just to communicate and just to say, this is what I feel, this is what I think. Tell me if I'm wrong or if you have any objections, and kind of leave your egos and your pride at the door and just realize that this is an exchange of ideas and an exchange of creativity, and it's just going to make the work better, and it makes you both better as creatives.
That's great. And you've mentioned it a few times, how you were working with this particular scheme with BBC Wales and It's My Shout to produce Heaven is Overrated. Could you maybe talk in a bit more detail about, firstly, what the pitching process for that was like, and then also just in general, what kind of the process of procuring funding is like for you as a director?
So the pitching process for the scheme was pretty straightforward. You applied online, you talked about why you wanted to be a part of the scheme, what you've done before, what you hope to do in the future. And then it was actually quite intense, because once they said, right, you've been shortlisted, they said, here's 6 short scripts. You have 24 hours to come up with a pitch for 2 of them and then be in the room and pitch them to us. And you'll be pitching to the broadcaster and you'll be pitching to the It's My Shout team. So it was a very, very quick turnaround, which is kind of also quite standard, I guess, for different parts of the industry, when people need a director last minute and you've kind of got to whip something together. So I just thought it was interesting that that's how the scheme did it as well. But I guess that prepares you for the eventualities of the industry. And then went in and I pitched Heaven's Overrated as my first choice. And then I pitched another script as my second choice. And I went in with a deck. I gave it everything I had, really, all the ideas that I had based on my third, fourth, and fifth read of the script. Threw my ideas in there and just took a swing, and luckily it hit. And that was it, really. I say that was it. It was like, it was over the course of, like, I applied. It was 3 months before I heard back. And then within the space of 24 hours, it was go, go, go. And then the following week, I had found out that I had gotten it. So it was great.
I guess, would you say you have any general advice on pitching to schemes like this?
Yeah, I would say give it your all. Put everything into a pitch deck. All of your ideas. It doesn't matter if it's music or if you're thinking about music already, or if you're thinking about production design. Throw everything in there. Throw visual references in. Talk about the fact that you understand what the story is. Talk about story beats. Again, I'll say it 100 times. Story beats. Understand how you want it to come across in the edit, how you want to see it on screen. How do you want to make people feel watching this? What do you want people to come away with after watching this? And just give it your all. Don't apologize for your enthusiasm either. If you get wrapped up in the excitement when pitching or developing your pitch deck, let that show, because people respond to enthusiasm and they respond to the passion that you have for the script and the story. And when it comes to applying for schemes, there are loads of schemes, but the competition is fierce. And that's not to discourage you from applying for it, but it just goes to show that if you don't really want it, that will show to people who are trying to select you from, thousands of people applying. So if you have a script and you're really into it, show it and just knock it out of the park, because what have you got to lose?
So we can maybe pivot into a bit of a more general conversation now, because after working on Heaven is Overrated, you directed Tales of the Tardis. Was the reception of Heaven is Overrated a big part in helping you get that role? And were there particular things that you learned on the set of Heaven is Overrated that helped with producing Tales of the Tardis?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think the thing that you learn most, the thing that you learn most on making shorts or smaller independent projects is, how do I creatively manage problems that happen continuously throughout shoot? You're constantly having to think on your feet, and the more you work, the more you strengthen that skill. And taking that from Heaven's Overrated and doing Tales was essential, because we had an enormous page count to do every day with actors who are brilliant at what they do, but haven't been on screen in a while. So there's time taken from the day where you want to make sure that they're comfortable getting back into the shoes of characters that they might not have been in for a while. A lot of what I took from Heaven's Overrated and put in Tales was, again, it's all relationship based. Like, it's two people, and the sole focus is what happens to these people. And in Tales, it's the same thing. Why are they in the Remembered TARDIS? What is going on here? They're trying to decipher it. The audience is trying to decipher it. And ultimately, your focus on very intimate shoots like that is, are you making the actors comfortable? Are they delivering the performance that you need? Are they hitting the story beats that you need? Is there enough variation in the performance that, just in case you need to tinker with things in the edit, do you have everything that you need there? Are you making this visually exciting and engaging for the audience, all whilst managing a crew and issues that you have on set, because they're all unpredictable and they happen at the most inopportune moments? And I think all of these skills you take from making short films. You learn those and they're baked into you, because you just have to accept that anything that can go wrong probably will go wrong, but it's your response to those situations that makes you a good director. How do you adapt? How do you change the shot list but still achieve your story beats and your narrative? And as long as you keep honing in on that skill, the better a director you're going to be. And it means that you're going to be able to tackle bigger shoots and more complex scenes and more complex shoots. So just remember that your time management and your problem solving skills with the people that you're working with is going to help save you or potentially sink you. So yeah.
Great. And it's really good that you talk about this kind of like taking different things and then using them across all these different positions, because I think you're a great example of someone who's worked in so many different roles across television and film production. So with Bad Wolf, for instance, you've taken on various assistant positions and directing positions across his Dark Materials, Doctor Who, and Tales of the TARDIS. My question is, do you have firstly any advice on getting these roles, particularly starting with entry-level roles and then building up? And then secondly, just leveraging those roles to move on to things that are more closely aligned to what you want to do, or that are taking on more responsibility on a set?
Yeah, I would say take the jobs you can. If there is a job and it's available, take it if you can, because there is no linear path to this industry, period, at all, at all. And that is really hard to like learn, because like, if you've gone to school wanting to be one thing and then you're trying to get that one job that you've obviously been trained to do, don't matter. Take the job that you can get, because when you're in, you're in. And then you can bounce around and you can eventually figure out where you need and want to be, and you can work your way up. I think that for me, at least, directing was something I always wanted to do, and I wanted it so badly that I was only trying to take jobs originally where that was going to like give me the most direct path to doing that. And eventually I learned I'm wasting time I'm wasting time. It's going to be quicker for me to get to different places if I'm just in the industry. But the most important thing is the relationships that you build. The industry, as big as it is also the smallest. Like, word of mouth will travel quickly if you've not been kind to someone on set, or if you've annoyed someone or said something or not worked or acted professionally. That will stay with you. And ultimately, we tell stories for a living, and no matter what position you are in the industry, and that is a privilege, and it is a pleasure to do. Enjoy and be grateful for the fact that you're in the industry, because your enthusiasm will show, and people will remember you, and people will want to take you with them on their next project, and they'll want you to stick around with them because that they can trust you. They know that they can come to you and you'll be able to solve a problem, or at least if you can throw your hands up in the air and say, I don't know how to fix this, use the ingenuity that you have to go and ask someone how to solve the problem. That's what happened with me on His Dark Materials. I started off as the series producer's assistant, and because I kept asking for more things to do, not because I didn't have enough to do, but because I was just so into being in the team and wanting to help, that I also became the assistant to all of the block producers, and also became assistant to Vicky DeLoe, who was the Block 3 producer at the time, and then moved on to becoming the series producer on Doctor Who. And during a shoot in Spain, Joel Collins, executive producer and production designer of His Dark Materials, just saw that kind of I went above and beyond what I was supposed to be doing, and said, you're the kind of person that we should have on the reboot of Who. Brought me in to meet Phil Collinson and Russell, and that was it. He took me from one Bad Wolf show to the next, but that was just because I kept showing my love for the craft and wanting to help and wanting to learn. If you tell people that you want to learn more, they'll give you more to do. And that's the best way to do it. And as long as you maintain those relationships, look, ultimately, if you're good to people, they're going to be good to you. That's it. Come to work with a smile on your face, and the willingness to want to learn and help and do more, and people will keep you around. And then as long as you're at the same time working on your own stuff, which is what I was doing with the kind of Heaven's Overrated as well, and working on my own scripts that I want to pitch for series, etc. As long as you're working on your own stuff, your timeline will fall into place eventually if you keep chipping away at it. But in all honesty, there is no real timeline for anyone. If you have this timeline in your head of like, by February of this year, this is going to happen, or, I'm going to get this script done, and then 3 months later, I'm going to get paid for that script, and then a year later, it's on screen, get rid of all of that. You have to be willing to go with the flow of this industry, because nothing is set in stone, and it is completely unpredictable. And the quicker you understand that and accept that, the easier all of this becomes. It took me a while to learn that lesson, because I'm a anxious person who just wants to get on and wants to make stuff and do it now. And it got to a point where it was so hard to like even concentrate on work, because I wanted to get to the next thing. You've got to let go of all of that and just trust that your hard work and your relationships and maintaining those relationships will all come together at some point, which is what happened with Heaven's Overrated. I took the opportunity whilst working on Doctor Who to make Heaven's Overrated. The execs knew that my ambition is to direct. I asked them for time off, and they said, absolutely. If you work for people who want to see you grow, they will give you the space to do so. So ask the question. And I was really fortunate for them to give me the time. So I took the time off to make the short. I came back, I showed it to them. I said, look, I've done this. I really want to get further and further. If anything comes up, if it's like a children in need scene, or if there's a small spin-off, or there's something, I'm here. You get that I know the system of how this show works, or how Bad Wolf works. I love it here. I'm doing what I can to advance my own career. I'm not asking for a handout. Look at my work. If you like it and it speaks to you, great. And luckily it did, because Heaven's Overrated and Tales of the Tardis are similar projects on different scales. And it was hard work, timing, fostering relationships over years. Bear in mind that I'd been working on the show for a while before Heaven's Overrated happened. It wasn't like I got on the show, I got the short, I got Tales. it's completely not it. That's not how it happened at all. It was a lot of time and it was a lot of work in between that. And that's kind of how it went down.
That's great. I mean, there's so much good advice there. Maybe to start, just because I know we're running short on time, just a
Sorry. I told you
question.
I'd waffle.
Not at all, no. Just maybe a question that will kind of sum things up. Just across your career, you've worked in lots of different contexts, as you've been mentioning there, right? On independent films, commercial content, and now kind of franchise media. Is there anything in particular that feels very different across all of those things? Or is there anything that is just a constant for you as a filmmaker, that regardless of what context you're in, you're facing these same challenges or same opportunities?
Um, I think working in branded content is very different, at least in my experience. Um, I don't want to say it's less story driven because that's not necessarily true. A lot of branded content is story driven. Um, but I think that you're working in a slightly different part of the industry because you're trying to achieve a product that has a much smaller runtime usually, and you kind of answer to creatives who control the budget but don't necessarily understand how the filmmaking process works. Um, I think if you want to tell stories, it's cool to dip your toe in what branded content is like and being on those sets because they're pretty intense environments as well, because you are answering to more of like a corporation as well. You're answering to someone who wants to sell a product, and you have to just be okay with the fact that that's what you're doing, and you're not telling Citizen Kane, you're not telling any of these like big stories. Um, but it's cool to get that experience because you learn a lot on how to manage a set and how to manage inexperienced actors, for example, or you have to adapt constantly on those sets as well. So it's good experience to have. I would say the constant throughout, no matter what you do, is time management. Period. It's like, how are you managing your day? The more prepped you are for any shoot, the better your product is going to be. The better your film is going to be, no matter what. Prep the hell out of anything that you have, because it gives you so much more freedom and headspace on the day when you're shooting. It's a game changer, and you can adapt and you come up with new ideas on the day. If you are underprepared for a shoot, it'll be a mess. It's just the truth. And you'll try and fix it in post, and it'll never be as good as you thought it would be. And remember, it's not just your work, I think, is a huge piece of advice. As a director, you are also taking the work of all of the other department heads, all of the crew members, and it is your job to pull that together and make sure that everybody shines, because everybody has a different piece of storytelling that they have worked towards creating as part of this project. It is not all about the director. It's not all about the actors. It's not all about the writers. It is about everybody who has given their all to this project, but it is your responsibility to make sure that everybody shines in different ways. So that's kind of my advice there.
I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for that, Joshua. That was such an interesting conversation, and I'm sure that the viewers will have taken so much good advice from it. For the viewers, you can watch Heaven is Overrated below on the YouTube bio or through the BFI Film Academy Instagram account for the rest of the day. And I'll also remind everybody that submissions for the BFI Future Film Festival have been extended by a week, meaning that they close tomorrow. So you still have a whole day to get your films in. And I'd strongly encourage anybody, if you have a film, if a film is nearly ready and you can get it done in a day, submit it, because you never know what could happen, and you could very soon be seeing it at the BFI Future Film Festival, which would be an amazing opportunity and experience for any young filmmaker. If you join us at the same time next week, my fellow young programmer, Elijah, will be talking to Max or Lincoln about their film Bag for Life. Until next time, thank you very much for watching.